In today's episode, we have a very special guest, Dhruva Bhat. He has an undergraduate degree from Harvard University, has done an MPhil from Oxford, and is currently a doctoral student and Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University in the UK. So let's get started. Hi Dhruva, thank you so much for being on the Student Success Series with me. I really hope all the students who are going this year benefit from this interview and your story.
Hi Ananya, it's wonderful to be here. Really excited. I know we did that Instagram live a few weeks ago, so looking forward to picking the conversation up where we left off, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much more I have to ask you about you and Lumiere and everything that you've done. But I'm going to get straight to it. You went to Harvard for your undergraduate degree. How was it? Like, was Harvard always part of the big grand plan for you? How did Harvard happen?
Yeah, so I think the truth is that I didn't and still don't have a big grand plan. And so whatever's happened has been a combination of making sort of smart choices at the right times and then a load of luck. So the context for me was I went to the same school from basically pre-KG, which is pre-kindergarten through till 12th grade. And it was a school here in Chennai that was a CBSE school, academically very strong. So a lot of alumni go on to the IITs, the NITs, and so on. But certainly not an international school or one from where a lot of students go abroad for undergrad. So that wasn't really on my mind at all in elementary and middle school. I started thinking about it probably in ninth grade, and the reason I started thinking about it was honestly because I didn't know what I wanted to do for undergrad, and everyone had started asking me, "What stream are you going to take? What do you want to be?" And I was like, I don't know, and I started reading up about the liberal arts system in the US, and I realized that it gave me time to explore and choose a major later on. I could do a major and a minor if I wanted to. And that was very exciting. So I still remember that I think in the 9th or 10th grade, I sent my dad an email with a link to Brown's website going, hey, maybe we should explore this. Okay. But then we started talking to people, and the constant refrain was, it doesn't really make sense to go abroad for undergrad. It's too expensive. Just go study undergrad in India and then go to the US for a master's degree or graduate studies if you want to.
Right.
And so I kind of put that idea on the back seat. Tried thinking about going the IIT JEE route, decided I didn't like science at all, and so picked the commerce group in the 11th grade, and then started preparing for the IIT Humanities as well as the CLAT entrance exam. So those would have been what I did had I stayed back in India.
Right.
And then what changed was in the 10th grade when I was sort of trying to figure out what I wanted to do for university, I ended up being selected to the Indian national debating team. So I was on the team of 5 people representing India at the World Schools Debating Championships. And that was a really interesting experience for me because that was the first time where I met people who were going abroad for undergrad for the first time. Until then, I didn't really know anyone who'd done it.
Yeah.
And in particular, I still vividly remember that I met Team UAE. We actually debated against them that year and lost. But Team UAE was pretty much all expats from the subcontinent or people of South Asian origin. And on that team, there was one person who was flying off right after the competition ended to start their undergrad at Stanford, one person who was starting at Yale, one person who was starting at NYU, and I think one person was starting at Penn. And so that blew my mind because these were people who sort of looked like me, maybe a couple of years older than me, who came from a similar-ish background, but they went to better schools in Dubai probably, but who were going to the US for undergrad. And that's the first time that it really felt possible that other people like me had done it, and so I could potentially do that too. And that's when I started thinking about it more seriously. And decided that I wanted to try my shot at applying to the US.
Wow, that's a big journey for you. And I completely relate to that as well. Like when no one around you has done it before, it's very difficult to think about and actually apply and think you're going to get in. because there's so many stages to even just the application process for the US.
For sure. And I mean, this entire story is just getting me to the point where I decided I wanted to apply abroad. We haven't even started talking about the actual application process. So I think you're exactly right.
But how did Harvard happen in particular? Like, did you, after all of this, like when you decided that, I'm going to apply, I want to study abroad for undergrad. I mean, Harvard is the hardest college to get into. So how did it fit as part of your plan?
Well, my priority was looking at universities that were likely to give financial aid for international students, because there's no way we could have afforded to study abroad otherwise. And I knew that a lot of universities in the US were what's called need aware for international students, which means that if you ask for financial aid, your chances of getting in are significantly lower than if you didn't ask for financial aid. And at that point, there were, I think, 4 universities that were not need aware for international students, or they were need blind. And so that was Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Amherst. So I was like, I'm applying to those for sure. And then I knew that there was this one university called Carleton College, which had a scholarship especially for debaters. So I added that onto my list. I had family in Atlanta. So like, let's give Emory a shot, because maybe then I could save money on accommodation by staying with family and figure something out, even if I don't get financial aid. And then I thought, okay, the universities that are most likely to give me financial aid are the wealthiest universities. Those happen to be the Ivy Leagues. So let's add those to the list. So I was not very mature about it. I was not thinking about it from the perspective of a reach school and a safety school and a target school. I wasn't thinking about it in terms of, how to sort of figure out my profile fitting in best into certain places. It was largely based on who did I think was most likely to give me money.
I mean, good way to look at it, I guess, because you got into the best college in any case, regardless of the money. So, but going from India, going to Harvard directly, and obviously, like, I understand that you studied at a CBSE system, and then you went, to one of the hardest colleges, even in terms of the academic rigor and everything. But besides that, what was the hardest thing for you at Harvard itself, coming or being an Indian student there?
Yeah, so I think Harvard's a really incredible place, because you've got some of the top students from all around the world who are all at Harvard. And I think the biggest thing about that is that it can be disconcerting for a lot of people, because the kinds of students who end up going to Harvard are used to being top of their class, or the best jazz player in their state, or the top, football player in their city. And then you go there and you've got people on all of these metrics who have, filed for patents before, or who have represented their country at the Olympics, or performed at Carnegie Hall. And you're like, there are people at Harvard who are playing in a different league to what I was even aware of existed. And that certainly happened to me, because I knew I was vaguely interested in the social sciences, but the level of economics I'd taken was this CBSE curriculum. I hadn't done an AP when I was applying. I just wasn't aware of it and how important they could be. On the debating front, which was my big extracurricular activity, India did reasonably well at the World Championships, but you had people there who had won the World Championships and come second at the World Championships. Right. And so in every aspect of what you think you're good at, it can be very unsettling to get there and realize actually there are people who are a lot better than you at each of those things. And thankfully for me, I don't think I was shaken by that. That's the part of Harvard that I really enjoyed, which is that they were all of these incredible people who were looking to participate in a collaborative atmosphere, because it actually didn't feel competitive at all through my time there. Looking to connect and talk and share their interests and help each other get better. So that was something that could have gone really poorly, but I think ended up working out quite well. What didn't go as well, I think, is that I feel like I certainly took the opportunity to explore. So I did classes in my first year in political science and economics. I took a class in law. I took a class in religion. But there were entire fields and areas that I just did not know what they meant or had no exposure to them at all. So something like sociology or anthropology or even some branches of philosophy, I didn't even consider them as potential majors because I didn't even know where to start. Those were not terms I'd heard before that I'd ever read up about. And so those were things that I sort of said, okay, and let me explore, but within the things that I understand and know. And I think that can be, it's very different if you come from a background or a family where your parents went to an American university or who come from more diverse backgrounds where thinking about doing an undergrad degree in intellectual history or doing an undergrad degree in social anthropology, those terms actually mean something. Whereas to me, I had no conception of what they were. And so I didn't take the opportunity to explore those as much.
Okay, absolutely. I mean, I can agree on every point because I myself did my undergrad in history. I would have never done it. I also took classes in religion, sociology, anthropology, art history. And you never have heard these words ever in India. It's just like science, commerce, economics, like there's, it's just those 5 basic subjects and that's what we're used to. And it's so nice to see that in the US, like even if it's just the one class, you may not have to major in it, but it's just the one class and it's so good to just explore possibilities. And that brings me to my next question, because we've been talking about it for a while. There's a lot of debate happening online about it as well, on the liberal arts versus the STEM, scope, as we like to call it here. But given that we both studied liberal arts, I know we're advocates of it, but there's a lot of misconception around the term, around the word, and people sometimes actually assume it's the actual arts, like performing arts and doing arts. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like there's economics is a liberal arts degree in itself. But I'm going to ask this question to you. So, I mean, what is your take on the whole liberal arts versus STEM debate?
Yeah, I think liberal arts is really a way of thinking about what a 4-year university education should be. So I wouldn't say liberal arts, the opposite is STEM. I'd say the opposite of a liberal arts degree is a professional degree. So a liberal arts degree says the goal of a 4-year undergrad is to take a 17-year-old and turn them into a citizen of the world, turn them into someone who's a mature thinker, who can engage with others, who's got familiarity with important things that are happening around them, who can communicate effectively, and do all of these things that we would expect of someone who is a citizen in a society, in a democracy, in a workplace. So that's the idea of a liberal arts education. And so practically what that means is that it usually has distribution requirements. So you have to take classes in the humanities, you have to take classes in math, you have to take classes in science, you have to take classes in history, you have to take classes across a wide variety of subjects so that you're familiar with all of them. And the second is it usually then requires you to pick a major, but has a bit of flexibility around that. And finally, liberal arts universities tend not to have very professional degrees. So you wouldn't find at a liberal arts university an accounting major or a business major or a law major for undergrad, because all of those are professional degrees which prepare you to do very well at a very specific job. And so that's, I'd say, what the comparison is. The reason why I said liberal arts and STEM are not mutually exclusive is because even at Harvard, you had a lot of STEM degrees. You had people who majored in engineering or biology or whatever else within the liberal arts system. The main difference is that rather than just doing those subjects with a view towards becoming a very, very good engineer and nothing else, they were still expected to do all of these other things as well so that they have a broader base of knowledge. So that's the basic idea of it. I really, really love the liberal arts system. I think that it prepares you super, super well to just become a better person. In that, as an adult, you have to vote, which is an incredibly important decision to make. You have to engage with others. You have to be aware of the news and what's around you. You have to be able to communicate effectively. And all of those are things that a liberal arts degree really pushes you to learn. And that then has effects on the workplace as well, because even if you take like a hardcore engineering company, like say an oil refining company, there's one subset of jobs within that organization which requires really serious technical skills. So if you're actually working on building better systems or building better refining plants, then you need to be a top quality engineer and nothing else. But for pretty much every single other role within that organization, if you are in finance, in HR, in management, in marketing and sales, all of them require a huge variety of skills beyond just the technical knowledge. And that's where I think the liberal arts system does a really good job of setting you up by forcing you to be able to think critically, laterally, and communicate effectively.
I mean, you've really summed it up in such a nice way as to what all the liberal arts degree can offer. I want to move now to you've done your MPhil, you're now a PhD or DPhil candidate at Oxford in England. Have you always, again, wanted to do a PhD at Oxford? How did that transition happen for you from economics to going to Oxford for your PhD?
Yeah. So in my 4 years of undergrad, I dove deep into research. I spent multiple summers working on research projects. I took classes that focused on research for which I had to write research papers. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed thinking about these big problems and spending time just nerding out about them and then figuring something out that other people hadn't thought of and then putting that together effectively in a paper or an article that's meant to convince others. So that process was super exciting for me. But graduate school in the US is a serious commitment. It can be anywhere between 5 to 7 years, depending on which PhD you're doing. And it sets you up very clearly for an academic path. And my sense was that I wanted to do something in between before I make the plunge into a PhD, whether that's a few years of work experience or a master's degree or whatever else. And so I applied for two things. I applied for the Rhodes Scholarship, which is the world's oldest scholarship for graduate study, and it allows you to study for 2 to 3 years at Oxford with a stipend. And I also applied for a development consulting job at this company called Dalberg, which works with governments, NGOs, international institutions to help them achieve their goals better. And those were my two options. And of course, if neither of them worked out, I would have then applied to other things. But I figured one of these could be what I do before I make a decision about going into a PhD. And so what ended up happening was I had to fly to Delhi for my Rhodes final round interview. So I flew from Harvard to Delhi for 2 or 3 days, which was a bizarre experience. Did the interview. The Rhodes process is really strange. So you have like a 20-minute interview, but then you have to stay at the venue the entire day. And at the end of the day, they call back all the finalists into a room and announce the winners of the scholarship right there in front of everyone. So they announced it. I was lucky enough to be one of them. And after that went back to the airport, was flying to Chennai, I think, for a day before heading to the US. And when I was at the airport, I got the call from Dalberg letting me know that I'd gotten the job at Dalberg as well. And unfortunately, I then had to say, I'm really excited about the firm, but I might have to hit pause on that for a couple of years because I've got this other incredible opportunity. And when they heard that, they said, no, that makes total sense. You should go to Oxford first. And so I went to Oxford, did the MPhil. And the MPhil was something I was really looking forward to because it was a really interdisciplinary way of looking at development. So it combines economics with anthropology and history and political science. And those were perspectives on development that I hadn't engaged with seriously before. If going back to the beginning of the conversation when I said it was because I didn't know what anthropology was. And I kind of knew what history was, but not really. So I wasn't mature enough in my first years to engage with that. But by the time I got to my master's, I felt like that was a perspective that I really needed. And when I went to Oxford and started engaging with all of those, I found them very fun and very useful. And I figured might as well extend that by 3-ish years to a PhD and then figure out whether I want to do an academic career or something else after that.
How did that start though? Was it at Harvard, and how has that transition rather, or your experience in research been for you?
Yeah, there's been two sort of changes in how I think about research, which have been really valuable. The first one was going from high school to college. In high school, when you say research, you usually mean collecting existing knowledge and putting it together.
Right.
Once you start engaging with research at a university level, you realize that actually research is about creating new knowledge. It's about providing new perspectives, gaining new insights, doing something that pushes human understanding just a little bit further. And so that was a pretty big shift in my understanding, because doing projects in high school was going on Wikipedia, copying and pasting sentences from different parts, and then writing it on A4 sheets with nice borders and pictures stuck in. And that was a research project. It very quickly realized that that's not what research actually is. And the type of research that actually is was mind-blowing, because it meant that I, as a 19-year-old, as whatever 25-year-old, am being trusted and being considered mature enough to enter into a conversation with these incredible thinkers from across time, and being able to offer something of my own to human society, which can help us hopefully down the line improve policy, improve our understanding of things, improve outcomes for people in need. So I think that's the first change in my understanding of research, which made a big difference, is realizing that I would be creating new knowledge and changing how people think about things. The second thing was, in undergrad, I did an economics degree. So that was the methods that I used for research were very quantitative. So it was mathematical models, quantitative data analysis using statistics, that sort of thing. And that was a lot of fun. But moving from undergrad to graduate school, I've started doing a lot more of what's called qualitative research. So that means research that involves speaking to people, observing things around me, and using that sort of data, which is less numerical and less sort of, I'd say, objective, and data that's much more potentially subjective, but much richer in the way that you can describe and understand things. So switching from quantitative research to qualitative research has been another big shift, which has continued to energize me about research and makes me realize just how many options there are out there, and how many ways of approaching this activity. So those two things have played a big role in increasing my excitement for research, and that's where I'm currently at.
You were saying that there's US system of research, and when you did economics and it was very quantitative, and then you moved to a more qualitative system. That could be like one difference, let's say, between what you studied in particular. But were there other differences that you saw between the US system of education and the way, PhD or MPhil runs in England, like the British system?
Yeah, there was so many differences. But just one thing to highlight, though, is that I think there are differences that stem from US versus UK. And there are differences that stem from undergrad versus grad school, and it's important to delineate the two. Let me, based on my reflections and trying to separate those two out in my head, I've thought about what are some of the major differences between the US and the UK, and there are definitely a couple. The first one is, I think that the US is sort of holds your hand a lot more than the UK does. So in the US system, you've got a semester that's broken up into a ton of smaller assignments. Each of these assignments, you know exactly how much it counts towards your GPA. If you need help, you've got a teaching assistant or a help center to go to. In the UK and in Oxford in particular, you get a reading list, you meet once a week with your tutor, and you're kind of expected to figure things out on your own. And then you write an exam at the end of your first year and an exam at the end of your third year. And those count towards, and those are all that matter towards your final grade. So the idea is that the UK is saying, we will provide you with the environment and with the support needed to become an independent scholar, but it's on you to take that up and make use of these opportunities and chart your own path for the kind of scholar you want to be. The US, in contrast, is saying, you guys are 17-year-olds. We don't always trust you to make the best decisions. So we're going to guide you at every step of the process. Both of those have their pluses and minuses, but I think it depends on the kind of student that is interested. The second thing I've also felt is that there's a lot more of an emphasis on extracurriculars in the US at US universities compared to UK universities. I think extracurriculars exist in both places, but maybe because applying to the US requires high school students to be trained in being really busy and having a lot of things on their plate.
Yes.
They carry that forward into university as well. Whereas in the UK system, academics matter most. So people will, of course, do one or two extracurricular activities, but not sort of be constantly busy and pushing themselves in the way that the US does. So once again, pluses and minuses to both systems. I think the US system probably can lead to a lot more burnout than the UK system, but on the flip side can push you to be a much more efficient and hardworking person. But those are things that once again suit different students differently.
So is that the catalyst for you starting Lumiere? Like, is that how it happened? How did how did Lumiere even begin?
Yeah, I think for me, gaining these understandings and a lot of other things around research have taken going from high school to the US, to the UK, through undergrad and grad school. And sometimes I'm just a bit like, surely we could have speeded that process up and given me all of this knowledge in high school so that I could have then made more informed decisions about what I wanted to do in undergrad and beyond. And so that's where it started, is thinking, this is something that I would have loved to know and loved to do when I was in high school as a nerdy little 17-year-old sitting in Chennai and talking to a friend of mine, Stephen, who was a classmate of mine at Harvard, and throwing ideas back and forth and realizing that this is something that actually could add a lot of value to students from around the world and could be a truly exciting and financially sustainable business idea as well. So bringing those two things together and kicking it off with a cohort of about 12 students and going from there to 600 students has been proof of concept, I'd say.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about Lumiere though, like what does it do and who does it benefit the most?
Yeah, so the basic idea is that it's a selective research program for talented and ambitious high school students from around the world. We run 4 cohorts over the course of the year. Students apply for any one of these cohorts through a written application. We interview them, and if they get selected, they get matched with a mentor. And our mentors are all PhD candidates at top research universities in the US and the UK. So the idea is really there are incredible students all over the place in the US and otherwise who don't have the privilege or the luck to be located near a top research university or to have parents who are professors and therefore know about research. And the goal is to bridge that distance through a research program and that's how it works. So then once the student and the mentor are matched, they work over the course of the program, which can vary from 12 weeks all the way up to 6 months for the longer programs. And they're meeting weekly, and those are really mentorship sessions. So the mentor is helping them explore their topic, pick a research question, and then write a research paper through this process, where the mentor is serving as a guide or a supervisor, and the student is doing the work of thinking and coming up with ideas and writing and refining and all of that.
Wow. Okay. So when is your next cohort starting?
Yeah, so we've got 2 cohorts coming up. Our spring cohort starts in March and our summer cohort starts in June. The summer cohort tends to be the most popular for obvious reasons. So we open applications for that very early. And so students can go on our website and apply even right now if they're.
So my last question basically is your advice for Indian international students now, either applying to the US or UK, wherever in the world. What would your advice be for them?
There'd be 2 things. The first is that the best you can do is put together a strong application and then hope. And a strong application is one which demonstrates that you are broadly well-rounded academically and in terms of extracurricular activities, but that you've got a couple of things that serve to really set you apart from others, whether that's a high degree of accomplishment in a particular subject or a particular sport or something else that says, I have gone above and beyond what other students have. So that's the first thing, is put in the effort to build that kind of experiences in high school. But then after that, don't obsess over one particular university or having to go to the Ivy Leagues or whatever. In general, you're going to have a great time whichever university you end up at, and you'll come out of it as a much more knowledgeable and better person at the end of it. So that's the first thing. Put in the effort, but don't obsess over it. And the second thing, which is I think related to that, is I really encourage students to enjoy the process, because especially if you're applying to the US, there's often interviews involved, there's long essays involved. And if a student has sort of just gone through high school ticking boxes or doing things because their parents have been forcing them to do it, I think it comes across when you speak to a student or when you read their essays. And in comparison, a student who is doing things because they really enjoy it, who is exploring subjects and doing extracurricular activities that really speak to them, that's a student that I think is able to offer a much more compelling explanation of why they've done these things and the kind of person that has made them and why they should get into these universities. So I guess that's a message to both parents and students is, I think there's a lot of kind of belief around the need to plan out every step of the process and tick all the boxes, and it's important that you enjoy that process as well, because this is, at the end of the day, 4 years of childhood that you're not getting back. So put in the work and work hard, but do it in areas that you enjoy and that you find fulfillment in, and that'll make you a better applicant when you do apply.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for saying that. Because everybody just, goes at it as if this is if I don't do this degree in this particular college, I'll be like this failure. I'll never get a job in my life. And I'm like, none of that matters. What matters is you're spending 4 years doing something. At least enjoy it. I mean, there's no point being miserable for 3 to 4 years of your undergraduate degree. That's not the point of going to the US or wherever you're going to study, is to be miserable and just complete something because XYZ said so. That's not the point. But thank you so much for putting it so nicely and being on my student success series. Thank you so much for this interview. And I'm really hoping a lot of students get a lot of benefit from it, because coming from somebody who's been to Harvard, coming from somebody who's been at Oxford right now, who's a Rhodes Scholar, but otherwise an Indian student, right? And we can do it. That's one thing, because you're a huge inspiration to a lot of students who are going to study. And now having started Lumiere as well for students to help them out, you're already giving back to so many students from around the world, not just India. So it's just absolutely fascinating to learn so much from you. So I really hope all the students who are going this year benefit from this interview and your story.
Thank you so much, Ananya. It's always a pleasure being in these conversations with you because of how wide-ranging and thoughtful they tend to be. And definitely found that things that you put out and the advice you give are generally so much more level-headed and reasonable and sort of thoughtful about the backgrounds that students are coming from than a lot of sources online. So really appreciate the work that you're doing. And I think that students are watching this. I hope that you continue to keep watching these student success interviews and other things. And of course, hope to see some of you apply to Lumiere as well.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dhruva. Thank you.